And we're live.
And we're hanging out.
I'm Alan.
And I'm Bear.
What's going on, Bear?
Man, I'm enjoying beautiful May weather in Tennessee.
Is it May there? It seems like it's just now March here.
We skipped spring completely. Went straight into summer.
Seems like we skipped some podcasts completely.
That's all right.
Is it?
It is.
It's all your fault. Bear fell off the wagon and he's been just in AA for 2 weeks.
Yeah, the whole 2 weeks.
The whole just in a room. They wouldn't let him up. They really wouldn't let him eat. I couldn't get hold of him, and that's why we were off for a week. No, we were re-examining the podcast, and I think we've come to a conclusion here that is very conducive to success. We were considering, I think we're going to considering and implementing. Well, I'm not exactly sure, Bear. Do you want to do 2 weeks? Do you want to do once a month? We want to do long-form podcasts. We don't want to produce content for content's sake. That's never been what we were about, and we've seen the power of some of the, like our education series was very strong, and a lot of good information came out of that. And then I want the podcast to be like that all the time.
Exactly. It started out as the Hanging Out podcast, and it's been great, and we're going to continue to hang out. But moving forward, we're going to have more focused and thought about topics as we hang out and kind of explore things as we work into it.
Right. And we're going to change the format. We might change the format a little bit to have maybe one part. I mean, when I say long form, these might come out to be 2-hour podcasts, 1-hour podcasts. Right now, when we record once every week, it is difficult for us to generate new information, even about our own lives on a week-to-week basis. And it becomes something that's just not as enjoyable for anyone, I think.
Right. And we want to provide something that's actually fun to listen to. So today, we're talking about something that I think has influenced both of our art and mindsets. Ernest Hemingway.
The importance of being earnest.
The importance of being earnest. That was another book, wasn't it?
I don't think he wrote that.
I think he did.
Did he?
It was hugely successful.
We clearly should not be talking about this topic. We don't even know what books he wrote.
Everyone's been thrust into reading Hemingway at some point in their lives if they went to public school, starting with Farewell to Arms.
I've never read that.
Really? It was a staple in my high school. Everyone had to read it. And
I knew a lot of people that read it. We were forced to read a lot of things that didn't make any sense to me.
Right. Of course, it doesn't
I love
make
reading.
any sense. Farewell to Arms is regarded as one of the best books ever written. But reading it in high school seems so disconnected. Of course, you're reading it to study a great piece of literature, but when you're 15, 16, reading about the Great War and Hemingway's take on it in a very profoundly violent and simple way, there's a total disconnect. Well,
I wrote in the description that we were going to talk about Hemingway as the a version of the artist working for themselves, the epitome of what it is to be a working artist and how it relates to our lives. And I think that Hemingway's life is very, it's like you're saying, of course you didn't understand it in high school. You hadn't been through anything. Hemingway's books are insanely relatable if you can even feel 1/10 of what he's talking about or have gone through it. He's not talking about passionate things, or he's not talking about them in a passionate way. He's just talking about it. And then if you're passionate about it, that's when it starts to hit you.
Right. That's where Farewell to Arms was the very simple thing. He's expressing it in a very simple way as he experienced it, not putting any kind of emotional twist on it. Like I was reading A Movable Feast just this morning, and he's talking about Ezra Pound and adverbs and adjectives becoming your enemy.
Oh, yeah.
Only writing as you experience, not putting the fluff on it.
Fluff is, you see it all the time in novels, of course, and in scripts and comics, but it's on Hemingway is like the other end of, it's almost like a technical book, like a how-to book where there's no adverbs or adjectives. And I keep coming across it. You come across the Hemingway editor on Google.
Yes,
where it goes through your essay and takes away any run-on sentences whatsoever.
It eliminates complex sentences from your writing.
And it really makes you sound like a robot. But no, so how does that relate to art? And what was Hemingway's ideas about that, about writing truthfully?
I think you can look back on his time in Paris when he was going to the galleries and the museums, and I know he loved Cézanne and the way Cézanne painted, and I think he said something to the effect of Cézanne started extremely skillfully and detailed with his concepts and his sketches, and then he broke it down into the most basic, simple expression of what it was and the way that he saw it. And I think that he tried very hard to take that and apply it into his own writing.
Yeah, I think that when he talks about writing truthfully, what he's really talking about is being true to yourself, which has been a big theme about our show here, which makes it the perfect topic.
Right.
Being true and simple is, I feel, only talking about what you know, and that's part of what being a good painter is. Say it has to be true to yourself and what you want to express. You can't be, I don't know, you can't be trying to do anything anyone else is doing because you're not them.
No, it's the classic Hemingway quote, if I can just write one true sentence.
Is that the end of the quote?
Yeah. That's his whole mantra. That's his goal as an artist, is to just write one true sentence through all of the short stories and writings, and to write that one true thing that he experienced and be honest about it.
And I think that he lived that kind of life too, trying to be true and honest with what he enjoyed, whether he was living poorly or living richly in Bimini, in the Bahamas.
He did. I think leading up to that, he trained very hard in Paris, honing his skill. And as soon as he got out of there, he knew he had to continue gathering experiences and pushing himself forward to have something to write about. I don't think he could write, a fantasy story. He had to write something that he had experienced and base the characters off of the people that were in that experience with him.
I think that's one of the reasons that I eventually stopped reading fantasy and started reading things kind of like Hemingway. I still read some great fantasies because they achieve the same thing, but it's only some. Most fantasies are just kind of becoming what Game of Thrones is. Somebody stopped having something to say and is now just producing content for content's sake, which is what we don't want to do as a podcast.
It's the vicious cycle.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's like it's starting with an original idea, and it's very successful, and then you can either do two things. You continue on that idea, or you come up with a new original idea. And say Game of Thrones said, screw that, we're just going to continue on this idea. And Hemingway said, screw that, I'm moving to Key West.
And drinking.
And drinking for the rest of
marrying 3 different people. No, I feel that way. I feel that, so Patrick Rothfuss did The Name of the Wind, which you probably haven't read. It's about a musician, a bard, who is attempting to come up in this magic music school. That's a terrible synopsis for it, but it's really a growing story about this guy who doesn't have any parents, and he feels very left out, and he has a small group of friends, and he's experiencing love and growth. And that's really what it's about. And you can tell reading that Patrick Rothfuss as a child was really just writing about himself. He's writing about the feelings of feeling lonely and awkward as a kid in a way that relates to a lot of people.
Right. And I see that in Hemingway's short stories, especially. He writes tiny encounters from Spain and the bullfights, or little street encounters in Cuba, or just in American life that are just clips, like slices of life that anyone could relate to very easily.
Right.
but carry a heavy, poignant tone with them. Usually, the story. He's exactly like the Impressionist, that he uses basic brushstrokes but creates something that's extremely emotional.
Yeah. Do you like my answers? Just one word. I'm going to see how long I can go. Yeah. I mean, I'm really trying to formulate consistent thought as to how and why it relates so heavily to people who are artists. And I think it's because Hemingway, in his, no matter what he's writing about, is writing in his perspective as an artist. And so these are extremely rich resources, very inspiring to your personal lifestyle, I feel.
Well, I think so. And I think that if you want to apply this or make it relevant to artists, I mean, both in his writing and the simplicity and taking from that, but also I think you have to look at him as a man and the time he spent with other artists outside of authors. I mean, he loved spending time with painters, with poets, with sculptors. I mean, he explored all of the arts to have an influence on his own, and I think there's something to be taken from that as well.
Well, I lost my thought.
That's fine. I think that he makes the case, Hemingway, not just for living a full life experience-wise and applying that, but living a full life art-wise as an artist, where he consumed as much art as possible to influence his own art.
Right.
Whether or not he liked it. I mean, he talks about reading books that he hates and despises, but he reads them because he needs to.
Yeah,
it's part of the process.
You have to be a sponge to the things that are happening around you and in your world, being a part of your world. Yeah, what I was going to say is, you can't find Rembrandt Rembrandt was very busy painting and surviving. He never had time to sit down and write a book about his daily habits and his personal morals. And that's all Hemingway did. and what he went through. It's all kind of biographical. And that's why I think it's an excellent resource for painters today. Speaking as painters, this is not a book like whatever her name is, Amanda, whoever did the Dresden Dolls, The Art of Asking. It's not a book about crowdfunding. It's not a book about getting closer with your fans or finding that light or truth within yourself. It's just really, he's talking about himself and his habits and his lifestyle. And at the time he was writing most of this stuff, he didn't know he would eventually become the most popular author in American history.
No.
So it's kind of important.
Not only did he not know it, but once he did know it, he defended it pretty viciously.
That's true, because I feel he always, in his writing, I think he always felt that it was worth something. And I mean, or maybe that he was worth something.
But to your point, of course, he certainly exaggerates in his novels and short stories, but he's a testament to remaining honest in your work and the success that can bring. I mean, I think that we can compare that to the people we've talked to in the show, and that Pete Moorbacher being the perfect example of, he paints exactly what he wants, and they're honest stories, analogies, myths from his life. And I think Hemingway was similar in that way, if you wanted to make the comparison to an artist that we've talked to.
Yeah, Pete posted something funny today. Maybe it was meant to be funny. It was like, when you see someone who's bad at art being successful, A, remember that art is subjective. B, go make some art that you think looks good. And I really think that was a driving force for Hemingway, as he was surrounded in a world where he had a very critical mindset, and he was very sure of himself, and he kept seeing people that were not giving their all or being different from what he thought the right way was. And he, instead of just fighting against that, he went and made something that he liked.
Exactly. He he said some horrible stuff, but he never directly protested anyone's way of life. He just went and tried to make his own way of life and exclude the rest.
Yeah. Yeah, it's weird to me that he was really growing up in a world where people were writing left. Writing was like the main media at that time. Books were blowing up sometime in the 12th century. No, he started as a journalist, and it would have been very easy when he stopped being a journalist to say, oh, well, I don't have to write plainly anymore. I can start adding in adjectives again. That would be great. But he didn't. And he didn't start writing like Fitzgerald or anyone else around him.
No, that was the thing, was when he picked that job up and started working at the Kansas City Star, I think it was, they had a rule book for the writers on precisely how they had to cover stories and how their rhetoric had to be. And he said that it was the greatest guidebook to writing that he had ever read.
Yeah.
He swore by it. And then he met Ezra Pound in Paris, and Ezra swore by only using the right word. And that had such a profound effect on Hemingway that it just, it exponentially impacted his simplicity.
I really deeply believe in having constraints on yourself. And I think that might be where he was coming from. Having those guidelines to push against, or it's almost like a funnel for your ideas.
It is. And in a way, I feel like for him, it was almost his natural way of, like, when I'm thinking, I don't toss in flowery thoughts to spice up my thoughts. I think in a very plain way, just like that, stream of consciousness.
Yeah, it's really weird that Hemingway wrote, anytime I added fluff or tried to make something sound better than it was, I found that I could toss that out the next day. And it's strange. I read, speaking of artists that wrote about themselves, Rockwell's book where he discusses his life as a painter. He said that anytime that I attempted to change the color of a shirt or the expression of a face too much, I found I could just erase it. It was always rubbish.
Right.
And it's like, oh, well, that's a pretty heavy similarity in two of the greatest artists from America.
And if you think about it, both of them covered something very simple and very plain. Rockwell was, of course, extremely talented in what he was able to do, but his scenes were just everyday scenes of American life.
Maybe what we're getting at is we all just need to be painting everyday scenes from our lives.
Well, it's something that's honest, and I don't think that you should do it for the sake of it's easy and successful, and especially if it's not something that you've experienced. I know a lot of people that, for example, don't know the small town life that I grew up with.
Right.
And you grew up with.
I talk to a lot of people who want to eventually be illustrators that have never painted portraits or still lifes before, and it really blows my mind. On the surface, it makes sense. Why would I paint, a vase of flowers or a metal cup whenever I could paint this dragon? And it's like, well, I don't know. You've never experienced a dragon. So that seems to make sense to me as a painter. How could you possibly paint something extravagant when you haven't experienced that form, that level of extravagance, when you don't have something to relate it to?
Yeah.
Dragons need to, when you paint, I think when people paint still lives, you and I could sit down and paint our best still life from the same picture, and they would both look different. And that says more than anything in this conversation, because we would both be seeking the honesty in that image. We would both be attempting to make the image look realistic, but we would both come out with two different pictures. That's crazy. And that really gets to the heart of it. If you could do that same thing when you're painting an illustrative scene, then you've hit, that's the $1 million question. How do you pull that off?
By experiencing as much as possible that you're interested in.
Right. Experience things, and then when the brush hits the canvas, be honest about that too.
But I think that's half of it. I think you can't ignore even the artists we've talked to talking about their formative years. And with Hemingway, you know, he said he'd wake up ultra early in Paris and write until 5 p.m.
Yeah, he had a very strict schedule of I recently read that he didn't drink until 5.
I mean, he just wrote like a Spartan because he was trying to hone his craft. He knew that what was coming next was going to be the experiences, but for now he had to hone his craft. And even, you know, Donato talked about his college experience, painting every day. Everyone we talked to talked about painting every day. And I can think of, to extend it to another art form, John Coltrane, known for training religiously on the saxophone before he ever took off.
Right.
I think
I get that, and you have to be.
There's the conceptual side and the practical side.
Work for, yeah, you know, and Hemingway never rushed himself either. I mean, maybe as a journalist, but when he was writing books, I read him say, you know, whether I wrote 2,000 or 200 words, as long as they were good words, it was a good day of writing.
And I feel the same about painting.
But you're still spending the same amount of time in a chair. It doesn't matter if you write 200 words or 2,000. You should still be spending 8 hours in that chair. Or standing, if you're Hemingway, leaned over.
Leaned over. Well, I feel like painters can relate to that, and that I've done portraits, and maybe I'm just blocking it in at the beginning, and I get a ton done in a day. But then the next day I'm doing some details, and I get very little done. But still, it's good, and I'm happy with it.
Yeah, that's really all that matters. If at the end of the day, I've had this recent thing that I've been saying to myself, my friends, which is go to bed exhausted every day, every single day. Because if you're not going to bed exhausted, then what have you even done?
Well, right, that's
you should be so full and happy with your days, and of course, every day can't be great, but you can always make the most out of it.
I've read articles and watched documentaries, whatever, that have talked about Hemingway and his quest for masculinity and all of his boastfulness and insanity in his experiences were all about being as masculine as possible. But people forget that he was a writer, and that was all that he cared about.
Right.
He
had a typewriter on his boat.
Right. He exhausted himself not just in writing, but in going out and experiencing the world so he could dedicate it to writing.
I don't think that he was doing those things in an attempt to be masculine, though. I think he just really enjoyed hunting.
He enjoyed it, and it was all for his art. Like, he was able to apply all that he enjoyed to his art.
Right.
Everything was in pursuit of writing.
Yeah. Definitely. Well, I mean, it's not... I wouldn't say it's in pursuit of writing. He didn't say, let me go to the Sahara, let me go to the savannah and shoot lions so that I can write about it. I think that he was just trying to... Yeah, I think he was living a life that made him happy, and then he would write about that life. You know, when he went to... He didn't care for New York. So he was never going to New York. So New York never shows up in his his writing.
No, not at all.
Things like he loved Paris. Paris shows up ample amounts of times in his writing. So
I would say he was always happy.
So how do you relate that to an artist? Like, where do you know, I can't paint Paris, and I would feel very uncomfortable painting my hometown because that's not where my heart lies. My heart lies in telling these stories as an illustrator.
Well, of course, that depends on your intent as an artist, but I think if you wanted to achieve in the same vein as Hemingway, you would have to go to these places and live there and experience them for what they are.
And so until I can do that, I guess my paintings should only... I guess I can still paint dragons, but
well, that's
sure that it's a way that I can express it from my own life.
Until you can do that, people should follow the steps of Hemingway, for example, and hone their craft and do the contract work that allows him to hone his craft until he can make his break.
Mm.
You know, he was writing the whole time he was in Paris for the Toronto newspaper as a foreign correspondent.
Right, which is a very strange idea to me.
and you know, I think his time as a reporter also influenced his desire to travel and go, and it kind of freed him to explore places from a different perspective because he had the reporter mentality just built in.
Yeah. Well, I always tell people that need jobs to go get, I mean, the people working as artists to go get jobs doing something else too.
You do, and it's not a bad idea, especially if it's out experiencing things that you're interested in.
I think you should do a lot of different jobs. I mean, at its core, any form of artist, like I said, needs to be a sponge. Although I think Patrick Rothfuss's Name of the Wind is a good book that I enjoyed reading, I think that it is also a very selfish book. It's never going to go to, I mean, well, maybe it will go down in fantasy history, but it's not Lord of the Rings. You know, he's writing about this one person's experiences in the way that other people and things affect that one person.
Right.
And I don't know. It just seems to come from a very selfish place. It reeks of someone who really hasn't done anything or gone anywhere in their lives.
Well,
it's not harsh. I think that that's the kind of people that are reading the book too.
Yeah.
You know,
a lot of Hemingway's sentiments come from a very selfish place. His writing was, he found a way to keep it out of his art, I think.
Yeah, selfish was not the right word. I guess what I meant is, I don't know, full of self.
Yeah.
It's like you're only writing about your experiences because, I don't know, I'm trying to think of another writer that achieves that.
Well, that's why
Faulkner. Maybe. I've never read a lot of Faulkner, but I think he writes a lot about this. Okay, well, we'll forget about Faulkner. So Bear's unsolicited advice for the episode is to not read Faulkner.
Forever. I think that Hemingway, part of his progression is that there were no other authors like him. I mean, Fitzgerald was on his level, but he died early.
Poor guy.
And he was someone that was able to be very honest, and he lived that flamboyant lifestyle, but he capped it off early.
You have to wonder if someone had been as honest as Hemingway in their in their lives, but didn't live Hemingway's life, they probably wouldn't have been very successful, actually.
Yeah.
He lived a very interesting life.
He had a personality that propelled him forward, I think.
It's a very difficult thing to replicate. At a certain point, it's almost like your your very rich friend who comes back and is like, "Man, you need to visit Spain one day. It's incredible." It's like, well, let me grab $10,000 real fast. Go to Spain.
And I'm sure there are other authors that I enjoy from his era and would enjoy that I just haven't discovered yet. But
I mean,
it's just the influence he's had on my work thus far.
The same thing happens to me. I mean, I see people that I love to hike. I'm not much for camping, but I love going and seeing nature and being in it and seeing mountains, and because I grew up in a very small town and I just like getting out and seeing amazing things. I love cities. And I see people doing that, and I'm very jealous of them because it's something I would like to do, but at the same time, I need to sit here and paint as well.
Right. That's because we're looking at Hemingway how many years in the future.
Yeah, that's true. There's no telling how many days he just sat and wrote.
You know, we think about him serving time in the Great War, but he's like 19.
Right.
It's insane to think about. I mean, that's how far of a head start he had on experience than people in our generation.
And then he would... What?
I know people that I graduated high school with that have gone overseas, but I think the Great War was a little different, especially in that time period.
Yeah, it really forced people into the world abroad. We don't really have that today.
Right. It's a different mindset.
It's very difficult to go to Paris.
And expensive. He lived there as an expatriate, very poor.
He didn't have running water.
I think it's important to know that when he was doing those formative years, he was extremely poor. And that's another thing that artists can relate to, I think, is, you know, even Hemingway struggled immensely.
Right. Yeah. Most of the time, Hemingway's writing about being very poor, which is another reason I deeply love reading his books, because he's also getting his writing done, which is difficult while you're poor and having to do other things to scrape by.
Right. Just living off of whatever article you can get out.
Something I've always believed. So, you know, I talk a lot about people should have jobs. You know, it's good to have your bills paid and make art. But also, you know, there will come a point at its basis, you could very easily pay your bills and not make art. They're not mutually exclusive things.
Yeah.
Just because you have your bills paid doesn't mean you're making art. So, I mean, what are you also willing to give up in your comforts to make the work that you want to make? How Hemingway lived poorly. I mean, he could have gone and been a factory worker.
Oh, he could have stayed in America and lived very well writing for newspaper.
Right. He could have just lived and died in Kansas City.
But he wanted to go to Paris, and that's where all the artists were.
Right.
He wanted to be he wanted to learn before he started writing.
So I guess another question is, you know, what are you willing to give up so that you can? It's easy when things are good.
Right.
What would you do if you didn't have to pay the bills anymore? Is a very solid question.
I know what I would do. I would paint.
Even after Hemingway's great success, he went back to World War II, and after Normandy, ran into Paris and continued to fight as a soldier. That's weird. And he was comfortable. He didn't have to do that.
He was running around as a rogue soldier, leading battalions.
Leading would-be civilians. And then he was
brought up on so many charges for the non-combat rules for journalists.
Right. He wasn't allowed to lead units into combat, but then he did it.
And he kind of did it comically.
Yeah, probably pretty comically. I think, but in the moment, he was probably like, well, I guess I should go risk my life as a journalist, and I won't be able to write anymore if I'm dead, but I should go do that.
Well, for some reason, he always had this insane pursuit of, I mean, the only way to say it is death, because when he was an ambulance driver in Italy, he continued to press and press and press until he got on the front lines. He demanded to go to World War II and cover that. He demanded to hunt U-boats in the Caribbean, which he really just used for free gas money, but still, he was out there with a fully loaded boat.
Right.
And then the bullfights. When there wasn't war, he would go to Spain to watch the bullfights because that's as close as he could get to death again.
Well, I don't know. Anytime somebody says something like, this person was seeking death their entire lives, I think it's a little Freudian.
Well, I'm not saying, I'm not in a philosophical way. He was just always on the edge of it, right there.
Right. Well, it's very possible. I mean, there's no doubt that he suffered from like PTSD from World War I and the Spanish War. And
right. Can't forget the Spanish Civil War. He had to be part of that.
And so to me, there's no way he didn't have PTSD, and maybe a thrill seeker, right? The same kind of person that takes planes to rural Africa to shoot lions is also going to be the same kind of person that does other crazy things.
I think it plays a little into his inability to write fantasy and his need to have those honest experiences. That's the only way he can make art.
All right. Maybe your ability to speak honestly is very limited if you're just sitting in a room in Kansas City.
And it seems like the guy was never sitting still. He was either doing those crazy things or in a room of other artists and people or politicians and famous people or out fishing or out hunting.
Well, say what you will about being poor, it is a very exciting lifestyle. I've been poor, and it makes your heart beat very quickly when you know you don't have money to do something that you really want to do, or maybe a bill's coming up due. And that's a very uncomfortable experience. And I would assume that World War I is also very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So maybe he was okay with, maybe he just wanted, maybe when he became successful, he just didn't want that comfort anymore. He didn't want comfort. It was boring. I can agree with that.
And I think you see that in a lot of artists. They deny comfort because it takes away from creativity, I think.
Yeah, I have found that artists that really lean into comfort is just become bad artists.
It's such a fine line between comfort and leisure and laziness.
And yeah, I mean, there's definitely, you want to be comfortable kind of while you're working. Do you want to be comfortable in your work? I don't know. I think of Rockwell again, who built a separate studio, and the studio itself looked very comfortable. But he was constantly working. It never got to him. So maybe being very self-aware.
Maybe it's just being an organized artist.
Yeah, I think if your drive... Oh, well, I think being self-aware, I mean, you can... Just because you don't have the drive to paint like Donato for 12 hours a day doesn't mean you shouldn't attempt to be an artist. But be aware of your own procrastinating habits and then stay very far away from them. I could be better at that. I think everyone could.
Yeah, I think so.
I mean,
that's the number one thing every artist needs to work on.
Yeah, being self-employed is a very difficult thing. Not employed, but what would you call it?
Self-employed is difficult, but being self-motivated is even more difficult.
Yeah. It's really alike to going to the gym almost. Like, what struggle are you willing to go through to get the body and health that you want?
Well, it's all hard work. I mean, you think about Hemingway, he knew exactly what he wanted to achieve as an author. He wanted to write one true thing. So that's all he did was write until he could do it. And as a painter, I think that's the greatest mindset you could have, is say, I want to paint one true scene or one true emotion to me, and then paint every single day. I can't get over how everyone we've talked to, that's the number one thing that's always stressed. It's just paint every day.
Yeah, get good. People get mad at me. Somebody asked me, oh, what are some tricks? How can I paint? And the real answer is just paint. It's like, how do I paint a desk? Well, you paint a desk. How do I paint skin? You paint skin a lot. You paint it a lot.
I think the important thing is you're not maintaining your skill, you're figuring out your language. And I think Hemingway is someone who had perfectly figured out his language and how to express his experiences. And the only way to do it is to do it every day so you can perfect it. Because everyone paints differently. Like you're saying, I'd paint the still life differently than you, but it doesn't mean it's less honest.
It is very important to put bitters in your gin and tonics.
If you want a master course in being an alcoholic, read Islands in the Stream.
He was not an alcoholic. He was on vacation, basically, kind of.
Permanently.
No. He was just living in the Bahamas, drinking a lot. But he was painting. Not Hemingway. I guess Hemingway would have been writing.
Yeah, but then what happened in the part 2?
Well, he was drinking. He moved from gin and tonics to daiquiris, and that's just what daiquiris do to your life.
And then what happened in part 3?
He killed some Germans. It's fine.
And then he caught some hot lead.
And
everybody loves him.
How would all of the books that I've read besides A Movable Feast end with the Hemingway character dying. You really might be onto something here.
Not all of them, but he's in a lot of his early short stories end with suicide, and his dad committed suicide.
Oh, yeah. I guess being surrounded by death makes you very capable of talking about it in your work.
I think, and this is a biographical side, but had it not been for the 2 plane crashes and the alcoholism and the shock therapy, he probably wouldn't have shot himself and gone on to write some more books.
No, a lot of people who have very basic knowledge of the author assumes that, oh, maybe he was always depressed, maybe he achieved something and then felt his life wasn't good anymore. I remember hearing when people had to read, a teacher in middle school explained to the class, it's like, oh, Hemingway wanted to write the perfect book, and then when he wrote Old Man and the Sea, he thought that he had, so he shot himself. And it's like, man, that is the least true thing I've ever heard. Now that I think about it, yeah, it could very possibly have been the leaking brain fluid and not being able to talk anymore. And I don't know, right. From the plane crashes, I feel like that might be closer to the truth.
If you read the final pages of A Movable Feast, you can really see where he is not all there.
Oh, really? I didn't get that.
Just rambling text.
I'm gonna go back and listen now.
Yes, they might not have in the book I have. It's the final chapter, but
no. Well, the preface to Islands in the Stream, which was done posthumously, Mary Hemingway, his wife, writes that she cut some parts out that she thought he would not want in there. So maybe that was what she was talking about.
Yeah, but she's not trustworthy because she was also a raging alcoholic.
Well, look, everyone was an alcoholic in the 50s. You can't just keep saying that.
I'm going to keep
Kennedy was probably an alcoholic, man.
You brought up The Old Man and the Sea, and I think for a painter, that's one of the most important short novels you can read.
Yeah, it stays with you. I remember when I finished reading it the other day, I was like, oh, that was just a story about a guy fishing. I don't really see how this relates to me or why it won any prizes. And then the next day I was at the gym and it all came crashing down and it hit me like a rocket. Like, oh God, this book is about me. It's about the pursuit of something that you'll never really have.
It's a masterclass.
It's
his entire life.
Yeah, it's probably the most. It's basically a shortened version of Finding the White Whale, and then, but with a totally different moral.
Totally different moral.
Yeah, who wrote? It was Dickens. Moby Dick was Dickens, right? Yeah, yeah. Talking about somebody who was very comfortable and didn't need to write that book. Hemingway rewrote it and made it better. I think that's what it is.
Did you just? I mean. Not the same story.
Look, it's fine. It's the same story.
Also,
like you take away the whole crew and the whale aspect, and you make it a single old man fishing for one.
Wrote Moby Dick.
Oh, was it Neville? Okay. Well, I was very confused. Look, I have a very bad memory today.
That's okay. Also, I'm an advocate for good memory. So is Hemingway. He's quoted as many times, having great memory. That'll help your art. Remember stuff. Get flashcards.
What? Why would I make flashcards?
Not you. You're lost cause.
No, I have a terrible. Well, I have a very good memory for things that happen, but not for things that I am supposed to know. And I'm not sure which is better. Things that happen to me, I have a very near photographic memory of events, but names, birthdays, it's gone. You just had a birthday. I don't remember when yours was.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I also recommend everyone to read Islands in the Stream. It is my favorite Hemingway book by far.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I have a hard time with I can't read the next two parts. That's
because they are horribly, horribly depressing.
Just like life. just like Hemingway's life.
I think that the book ends open-ended, but I think it's one of those beautifully written books. But I think Hemingway had the wrong message.
What was the right message? I don't understand. What was the message supposed to be?
I'm a warrior for light.
Doesn't make any sense. You can't just say things that sound like an anime and think that you're saying the right thing.
Peace and love, man.
Oh my God.
Not bleeding out on a boat deck.
You gotta fight for what you believe in. It's okay.
Is it?
Life can't be perfect.
Mine is.
Hemingway perfected the daiquiri, and a depressed person couldn't possibly have made that drink.
Or drank as many as he did.
Yeah, I think depressed people don't drink.
Towards the end, when he was in Cuba, it's funny that he created his own little hideaway with all of his favorite people and artists and influencers. It's like he just gave the finger to the rest of the world, and it was the Hemingway getaway.
Hemingway getaway.
Come drink daiquiris at the Floridian with Ernest Hemingway. That's every artist's end goal, right? Like to have a successful career, and then when you retire, all your friends are just right there drinking with you forever at your private bar.
I already have a private bar. It's my house.
What's your unsolicited advice, Alan?
The same one, probably. I would say read Movable Feast. I think that it offers more for artists.
Oh, yes.
I think that he gives advice as an artist and as a man. Not a person that is greatly... everyone should read that. Everyone, like when they're 3, should read that.
I wish that's the book that they would have people read in high school. Because it talks about all of the artists you have to read and look at. And probably some of A Movable Feast is exaggerated, but it's a lovely time reading about these honest interactions with other artists that reads like a short story. Like it should be fiction.
I've always felt that, we were just talking about how when you read Hemingway in high school, you can't get it because you haven't experienced those things that he's talking about. And I've always believed that high school teachers are maybe just getting into things like this, or maybe they had to read it in college, and they're like, oh, okay, kids need to read this, just like we're saying now. And it's a fatal mistake because kids don't care about this. And
Not at all.
They should read things that would be interesting and valid for them. Anyway, I don't want to get on my tangent about the failure of the education system.
That's okay. That'll be another episode. We'll bring Kelsey in on that one.
The failure of the education system.
She's an actual teacher.
What if we need to switch it up one day? We need to get our significant others to run the podcast. Welcome
to Hanging Out with Sarah and Kelsey.
That kind of rolls off the tongue. I think we should
Kelsey and Sarah.
Oh, no, I don't like that one. That one hurts me.
Well, we've about exhausted Hemingway for the day, but I think we covered a good amount of comparisons to art.
Yeah, we're not experts, and I really don't want to be an expert. I just want to paint.
We are painting.
Almost that we need to get other hobbies to talk about, because we really come to this conclusion that it's like we don't have any advice to give on painting. You just need to paint.
We're not going to give any advice. We're going to keep talking about what influences us and what we're interested in artists, and you're going to put up with it.
But don't berate the audience.
Hey, they need it. They need a little motivation. They need to go paint every day.
Hopefully you're painting right now. I painted. I made a lot of money this month. This is my first month where I've made a little over a living salary off of my artwork. And
look, everyone listening, you know where we started. Go back to episode 1, and now Alan's saying he's making a living wage off art.
What did I say in episode 1?
Oh, we were both poor in episode 1.
Yeah, that's true. You didn't have a job.
I was unemployed.
Unfortunately, you're employed now. You should just be painting.
I know. I'm gonna paint tonight though, so get excited.
If everyone listening could email Bear at bearthepainter@gmail.com, I think.
Yeah, please email me and tell me to paint.
Tell him to paint. Tell him to get his ass. You know what you need is you need a project, like a long-standing project with a deadline. Yeah, I'm gonna take all the money that I made this month and I'm gonna hire you.
There you go.
I'm gonna hire you to do a painting a day for a month.
It's a done deal. Also, everyone, www.artasylumforum.com. Go there, upload your art, talk on the forums, have a good time.
You really need to get that out into the world in another way that's not the podcast.
Oh yeah, it's going out, but I'm gonna advertise it minimally. I'm gonna trust artists to get it out there for me.
Do you know who really needs to upload their stuff on there?
Donato.
Me.
Oh yeah, Alan has yet to join my forum.
Well, I tried to, and the day, the zeros and ones were mixed up that day.
We got them fixed, and they'll be fixed for you, the general population. Come join us.
I feel like I've been painting for the last 2 months, which is a good feeling. And now that I'm seeing the fruits of that labor, I don't really know what to do because I've taken on other jobs, and I'm thankful that those jobs came in and that I'm able to do them. But I would like to stop working for money for like a week and just start doing other things, but I can't afford that because I've got deadlines. So I'm in this really weird spot where I no longer want any more money right now.
Well, I don't think you should do that because I think you've done some monumental pieces lately in the contract work that you've done.
I think I just do need to actually give you all of this money so that I can feel pushed again.
Yeah, you are someone who really doesn't need to be comfortable.
What do you mean? What are you talking about?
You're doing such great work on this contract work, and now you're talking about abandoning it.
No, I do great work being comfortable. I do comfortable really well.
I guess.
Not working hard and sitting out. See, it's really bad because it just became sunny here at the same time that I got paid all at once. And I'm just gonna. All I want to do is sit outside with a cocktail.
See, it's torture. Imagine me. My office doesn't even have a window.
Whoa.
It's okay. I just go outside with my camera, snap some shots, go back in.
Pear, what are you doing? Working.
Working.
Camera doesn't even have a memory card in it. No, that's part of, one of my heroes, Todd Lockwood, wrote in his, if you ever want to be inspired, go read his frequently asked questions. He said, if you want to be a professional artist, weekends don't really exist. You can't sit by the pool. This is a very difficult profession, and it just is. I mean, as much as I want it, like I see these sunny days and I have to block out maybe an hour to go out there, but then I know I have to come back in here.
Right. I've had an off week this week, but
you had some friends visit.
I had friends visit.
You had an experience, which is
an experience.
I feel like the best way to do things, if your goal was to make good paintings and you didn't have to make a living off of it, I feel that the greatest way to accomplish that is to spend 1 week living life and then spend the next week painting. You should paint a lot.
Vacation.
Well,
go live in it. Live in the shit.
Yeah, you should. You need to. Yeah, that's true. I guess you're what? Okay, yeah, I rescind what I said. That's not true at all. I think that your paint needs to be part of your life.
Don't take vacations.
And you should never take vacations. I heavily fight against taking vacations. If your life is so bad that you really feel like you need to take a vacation, get a different life.
I need a vacation.
Fuck. Bear's coming to Seattle in July. We're going to have a hanging out con.
No, you're talking about the weekend stuff. Sometimes I come home from work and it feels like, I have dinner and I relax for a second and then it's, okay, let's get the second half of the day started. And lately it's been putting together the website, but even painting, I have another commission I've still got to finish.
You really need to get on those commissions. I feel like you got commissions, and then you were like, "Oh, I've got this website idea."
No, I only have one now. I'm caught up.
Okay, I don't believe you.
That's fine.
I don't believe in being caught up.
Oh, I mean,
don't be caught up.
Caught up.
Go get more commissions right now.
That I'm comfortable waiting one more day to paint.
Don't be comfortable. Don't be comfortable. Don't take vacations. Don't take planes to Africa. Don't own shotguns. Don't drink martinis before 5 unless it is a vacation, which you shouldn't take.
Don't own shotguns.
Go charter fishing.
I guess. I mean, that seemed like torture for him.
Sorry if there's a lot of background noise. The people next door are getting their roof redone.
We can't hear a thing on our end.
Okay, great.
The classic Alan sigh.
It's one of those weird weeks, man. If I had my way, I wouldn't have recorded the podcast, but it needed to get done. This is why we need to take the time to reevaluate and talk about things we can become excited about, too. I didn't have any time to think about Hemingway today. I had to get, I thought that I was, and then I woke up and a lot of crazy shit happened in the art world.
Well, damn.
I had to make corrections, send out invoices, go walk to the mailbox once.
You got mad at me for wanting to take time to think about it.
You shouldn't have. No, I've just been working all day. I do print shop work, schedule things for conventions. It's crazy. This has been one of those days where I've gotten very little art done, and it sucks. And then I have to go eat. Isn't that crazy?
I know. If only we could just eat intravenously.
My life is so hard.
I know. Alan's making money, everyone. Pity him.
It's terrible. Everyone should pity me.
I think we had a solid conversation on Hemingway, and Alan's very critical of the podcast. You have to forgive him.
No, I think we had a good conversation. If we got some people who are painting or artists to go read Hemingway for the first time and really experience that, then I think we've succeeded at something joyous.
I'd be happy. You hated Hemingway the first time I told you to go read him.
I didn't hate Hemingway. I just refused to read him.
And then you did. Listen to him, rather.
Yeah, I only read audiobooks now.
Listen.
I only read audiobooks.
Alan only listens to audiobooks.
Because I'm busy painting. Do you know how long it would take me to read books if I paint 12 hours a day here. Come on.
I understand. It's fine.
And I can get through 8 hours of reading in that time, basically.
I just can't. I have to have the words. I love reading the words.
Yeah, you know what?
It's like looking at the painting.
Okay, well, I loved reading the words too, but when you're in a situation where you can't read the words, you have to go for the next best thing.
I guess.
I actually usually read 2 books. I have a book that I read in my personal life and a book that I read or listen to while I work. So
that's fair.
Yeah. Is anything fair?
No.
Isn't that what we're talking about? Nothing's fair. You just make the best of it. Keep painting. Keep struggling. Don't take vacations. All right. That's a good show.
I think next week you can look. We're going to both bring an artist to the table to talk about, and then not next week, but the next time we record, we'll both have an artist to present.
No, I don't know if that's a good idea. I'm going to tell you about it after the show.
And then we're going to talk about something else fun.
But if you have ideas that you want to hear us talk on, if you want to be on the show, and I'm being real serious here, we need people to come on the show and talk about their interesting ideas. It really is anyone. You don't have to be famous. I want to know what other people's schedules look like. I want to know what your procrastination is. I want to know what kind of good drinks you make. I want to know what you're interested in your painting life. I mean, get on here. Tell us what's going on.
Come hang out with us.
You can find us at hangoutpodcast@gmail.com. I really want to hear from you.
Anything.
We're struggling here, folks. Come on. All right. This is a good talk. I'll be on my game next week. I promise. Bear had a good talk with you guys.
We love you guys. Just keep being part of the community, and we'll keep putting it out.
Bye.
Bye!